welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take all that information coming at you and we'll try to pull out the really interesting bits.
That's the plan.
So today, we're diving into something lots of you have mentioned, Generation Alpha. And just as importantly, how their millennial parents are raising them.
Right. We've looked at some pieces from the South China Morning Post, Parents.com, Research World, all for kids. Quite a mix.
Yeah, the goal is to give you a clear, concise picture, maybe even uncover a few surprises without you having to read everything yourself.
So just to set the scene,
Yeah.
Gen Alpha, born roughly 2010 to 2025. Their parents are mostly millennials, born, say, 1981 to 1996.
Though, of course, some Gen Xers or Boomers might have Alpha kids too.
True, but the big trends we're seeing seem really tied to that millennial group.
Okay, so our mission today, understand Gen Alpha, figure out what makes millennial parenting tick, and maybe think about what it all means for the future.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
one of the first things that really jumps out for the source is this pretty big shift in what millennial parents actually want for their kids.
Yeah, it's not necessarily pushing for, doctor, lawyer, banker right away.
Exactly. The South China Morning Post mentions a study, I think from Research World, saying something like over 90%, 90 of millennial parents put their kids' happiness first before traditional success.
That's a huge number, and it really signals a change from how maybe previous generations thought about it.
What do you think is driving that?
Well, it could be a lot of things. Maybe a greater awareness of mental health issues from their own experiences, wanting something different, maybe less pressured for their own kids.
Kind of like, let's fix what maybe wasn't perfect for us.
Sort of, yeah. But maybe more than just fixing, actively aiming for a different kind of childhood focused on well-being.
Makes sense. Okay, another massive factor here, mentioned everywhere really, is technology. Gen Alpha are the true digital natives.
They literally don't know a world without social media. That's something.
And Parents.com points out this timing, the iPad launching in 2010, right when Gen Alpha starts appearing.
It's almost perfectly aligned, isn't it? For many of these kids, tablets, screens, they've just always been there.
And millennials get that technology is useful, right?
That's
For
right.
education, entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. But they also seem really, really aware of the potential downsides. Parents.com mentioned research about potential impacts on brain development from too much screen time early on.
It feels like they're walking this tightrope.
Definitely navigating new territory. And there's this other angle. Francine Zeltzer, a psychologist quoted in Parents.com, brought it up.
The digital footprint thing.
Exactly. These kids have a digital record from birth, practically.
Yeah.
Photos, mentions online. It all adds up. And we honestly don't know the long-term consequences of that yet, for jobs, for life.
It's kind of unnerving when you think about it.
It really is.
Okay, so let's shift to the parenting styles themselves. Research World described the millennial approach as almost professional.
Yeah, like they're planning it out, researching, almost like a career move in some ways.
Is there data on that?
There is, actually. Research World found 34% of millennial parents said they actively planned their pregnancies. For Gen X, that number was lower, around 25%.
So more intentionality about starting families?
Seems like it, yeah. A higher degree of planning involved.
But here's an interesting bit from that same study. Millennial dads are apparently more emotionally involved, which is great. But there's a gap in perception about who does what. Like, 62% of the dads felt parenting duties were shared equally,
Okay.
but only 43% of the moms agreed. That's a pretty big difference.
That is quite a gap. It makes you wonder about the reality versus the ideal of shared responsibility. Maybe that fix what we did idea is still more aspiration than practice in some homes.
Could be. And then layer on social media, Research World called it the goldfish bowl effect.
Ah, yes, the constant comparison.
Right. 42% of millennial parents feel pressured to keep up with what other parents are posting online.
And nearly half, 45%, said celebrity influencers actually made them feel bad about their own parenting.
Wow. That's a lot of external noise.
It really highlights the unique stress of parenting today. You're seeing these perfect-looking, curated family lives all the time. It breeds insecurity.
Which probably explains why, according to Research World again, a huge chunk, 75%, are trying to delay their kids getting onto social media.
They see the pressure it puts on them, so they want to shield their kids from it for as long as possible.
And get this, 35% of millennial parents overall like the idea of their kids' digital footprint just being wiped clean at 18.
Wiped clean.
Yeah. And for dads, that number was even higher, 45%. That really shows the anxiety about this permanent digital trail.
It absolutely does. But interestingly, despite all these digital worries, most of them, 77%, still said that spending time with their kids was more important than their careers.
So that core value of being present, prioritizing the kids, it's still really strong.
It seems to be the central theme, yeah.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to education, because there seems to be some, I don't know, growing doubt about traditional schools.
Yeah, both the SCMP and Research World point to this. Around 57% of millennial parents feel schools aren't really preparing their kids for the future.
And that's higher than Gen X parents felt, right?
It is. For Gen X, it was closer to 47%. So, yeah, a noticeable increase in skepticism among millennials.
And what does that lead to?
Well, potentially. Exploring other options. Research World found that 36% of millennials would actually consider homeschooling.
A third. That's significant. It's not just grumbling, it's thinking about real alternatives.
Exactly. A willingness to look beyond the traditional system if they think it'll serve their kids better.
And I guess this all connects back to that first point we made about redefining success.
Precisely. That Research World stat again. 81% of millennials said it's more important for their kids to be happy than to achieve traditional success markers.
81%. It's a fundamental shift in values.
Yeah, putting mental health, life satisfaction, general well-being ahead of, say, the corner office or the big salary.
So, thinking about Gen Alpha themselves,
Mhm.
what are the potential upsides of being raised this way?
Well, Parents.com suggests they're growing up in a society that is, visually at least, more diverse. That could lead to them being more accepting, more inclusive.
They mentioned rising diversity in places like Congress
Yeah.
as reflecting that broader shift.
Right. And connecting that to the millennial focus, you could see Gen Alpha potentially being more socially aware, maybe more engaged with big issues like climate change.
Is there optimism about that?
Quite a bit, actually. Research World found 53% of millennial parents believe Gen Alpha will help fix problems left by previous generations. That's a lot of hope riding on them.
It is. And apparently they already have some influence at home.
It seems so. Research World suggests parents are quite open to their opinions, even on things like family purchases or environmental choices. They have a voice.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this deep dive up. What are the big takeaways?
Well, it seems clear millennial parenting is really quite different. Big focus on happiness, this complex relationship with technology, navigating the good and the bad, and definitely rethinking traditional ideas about school and what success even means.
And that's shaping Gen Alpha into this generation that's digital from the start, maybe more inclusive, maybe more socially conscious.
That seems to be the potential trajectory, yes.
For me, the real aha moments were that huge 90% figure on happiness, the sheer scale of the screen time, digital footprint anxiety, and how many are actually considering homeschooling.
It really drives home how millennials' own lives are directly shaping their parenting.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with some big questions for you, the listener, to think about. How will these values play out as Gen Alpha grows up and starts making their own mark on the world?
Yeah, and what are the real long-term effects of growing up completely immersed in the digital age, especially if your parents are already questioning the old paths to success?
Definitely something to keep pondering.